I can tell you on any construction project, if you are installing framing, drywall, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, the whole standard utility package, you will not have 90% plus laborers on that project. That's what a lot of companies use because they feel like it's the catch-all.
Welcome to the Prevailing Wage Report, where we promise it's certified. Before we dive in, if you like the podcast, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube or your preferred podcasting platform. So, Heather, today we're going to be talking about Colorado, everything in and out. So we're seeing a lot of new money entering the state. And so how is this surge in infrastructure funding in Colorado driving the compliance demand right now?
Sure, it is definitely increasing the demand. There's a lot of money going into infrastructure in Colorado, and a lot of companies want to be a part of those projects for various reasons. Some of the common are because the privately funded projects aren't as common as they were, so they need to include prevailing wage public works projects in their business model. And some just would like to work in the prevailing wage space. Like that's always been their goal, and now is the time to do it. With so many new companies working in this space and companies that have worked for a long time in this space, but have now newer professionals, they're wanting to update their labor reporting aspects in their company. So it's been a lot of interest in this space recently.
So for these new contractors that are jumping into the many opportunities, what exactly is prevailing wage on these Colorado infrastructure projects, and why is it so critical that they get it right the first time?
Sure. So on these prevailing wage projects, specifically in the state of Colorado, it's important because there's grants out there. One of them is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act grant, the IIJA, and it specifically focuses on infrastructure, energy, broadband, water infrastructure, and then climate and resilience. So things that affect our environment around us. And with that is, of course, roads and railways, bridges, transit, things like that. All of these grants can be given at the federal level or state or local. So if you're looking at the state of Colorado and their labor reporting requirements, it's difficult when you're used to federal requirements. There's a lot of parallels between federal and state, and then federal, state, and local. So when you have state requirements, and if you're using, say, the IIJA grants money, there's a federal component. So now you have two, so you have to squish them together. So key elements that need to be focused on are the trade classifications. Like that needs to be the first thing that is managed. And it's tricky with the federal and the state funds. So there's some conflict there until it's resolved, but it can be managed. I like to joke around, dependent on where you're at in the country, what do you call Dr. Pepper? In some parts of the country, it's called Coke. Some is called soda. Some is called soda pop. It's the same thing with trade classifications. It's frustrating for a lot of people. So I would say that one. And then another component would be how the agencies respond. In the federal level, it can be kind of time lags between when you interact with the agency official, and then at the state level you see them more, and then at the local level it can be even more. So there's nuances between the state and the federal. So I would say those are probably the two biggest. And it's funny because if you're used to working on federal funded projects and then you go to state, I've had clients reach out and say, I've never talked to these agencies so often on these projects. What's going on? Am I doing it wrong? And then they tell me where the project is. I was like, no, that's normal. But they're like, are you sure? I'm like, that's just absolutely normal in Colorado. Not to be concerned. If you're doing all things accurate, not to be concerned. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of nuance to the tiers, and especially trying to make sure that you comply with everything from local to state to federal. There's so many little details that you just have to make sure that you're aware of. Um, so from there, before shovels ever hit dirt, obviously the compliance journey starts at bidding. What are the key things that contractors need to know about preparing a compliant bid for a Colorado infrastructure project?
Sure. Key elements. You need to make sure and ask what I consider core questions during the bidding process. You need to understand what's required for the project. And we have this list of key questions that we recommend all of our clients utilize. And so that would be one. Another would be you need to make sure your trade classifications are accurate. It goes back to the what do you call Dr. Pepper situation. It's different between the federal and the state versus a local municipality. You need to understand what that entails. And then the third element would be the apprentices. Always have a plan in place for that. Just because your company doesn't have apprentices on site doesn't mean your lower tiers won't. And if you go with the assumption but don't actually ask, that does not tend to go well for anybody because it's more expensive.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. So, for everybody who is enjoying this conversation, if you want to stay up to date on prevailing wage compliance, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube or on your preferred podcasting platforms. So, getting into labor classification, once the project is won and workers are on site, a lot of teams struggle with classifications. What are the most common worker classification issues that you see on these projects?
Sure. Not tracking what people are doing. A lot of labor reporting is considered as part of the back office tasks for a company. And by back office, I mean payroll, HR, accounting functions. Uh, it's not. I mean, yes, they have a key element to it, but it's not. It's really on site. Those that are on site have the pivot point, in my opinion. You bid the project properly, and you have the people on the job site, and then you report it, which is where the back office people come in. And so I would say not documenting properly what people are doing on site. And then the second thing would be incorrect trade classification usage. Consistently, the one that is very consistently used is laborer across the board. I can tell you on any construction project, if you are installing framing, drywall, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, the whole standard utility package, you will not have 90% plus laborers on that project. But that's what a lot of companies use because they feel like it's the catch all. They're not quite sure what to use, so that's what they use. And it's usually one of the lower paid trade classifications, which is why it's gone after pretty consistently. So that would be another one. And then I would also say the third one would be apprentices being paid incorrectly. And it's makes sense why they're paid incorrectly on prevailing wage projects because the information is pulled from like so many different areas. It's painful. You can't just look at a sheet and it says step one, do this, step two, do that. It's not that easy. So that'd be another.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned obviously the laborers are the cheaper ones, so that's why people go for it. Getting into the payroll. So how does the payroll requirements differ from, why are they so specific in Colorado? And what are the requirements for that paperwork to make sure it's done right?
Sure. So a lot of knowledge is known around the federal form, the certified payroll form WH-347. Last year it changed and is now bright orange. So if you're using a form and it's not bright orange, you're using an outdated one. check out the orange one. But that information is basically also required in Colorado. The frustration or the pain point comes in because there's requirements for specific forms for the state that they want their information, the same information, but put on their form potentially. There's a specific software you have to report it in. And it's at the federal level, the minimum requirement is the federal form. Whereas at the state level, it could be the minimum requirement is a certified payroll software system or their state form, something like that. So it's the same information, but a different format and delivery method, email, PDF, software system. So it's all in the nuances. And that's where a lot of companies, they think, oh, well, I'm going to fill out the federal form. It'll be fine. I don't know about that. They're pretty specific in several states.
Yeah. That I feel like there's a lot of varied, like, obviously there's so many details. And then the big thing is I feel like there can be a lot of consequences if they're not done right. So what does the fallout from that look like? And so how does maybe with compliance issues end up delaying, the project itself and impacting the overall potential budget?
Sure. So on federal funded projects, there's fine on all of them. There's fines and penalties. It can also delay payments, whereas at the state level, Colorado specifically, they're quicker to turn around and say, this is wrong, fix this, do this, make changes. These workers are classified incorrectly. It has a quicker response time. It also means that the fines and penalties are applied more consistently, which can be a positive if you fix what is wrong and then it doesn't happen again. So it costs less. But no matter what the minimum is you have to pay the workers properly. So at any level, you have to pay the workers properly. It's understanding what is the actual proper pay. And that's very dependent on many factors. And at the state level, they have their opinions. And so when you're working on these projects, you need to understand what their preferences are. This standard information for labor reporting is still there, but don't ignore that a specific agency has specific definitions. So in Colorado, concrete finisher is not a trade classification. They do have one, but if you try using that in Colorado, it will not be accepted across the board because they don't have that. At the federal level, it will be, but at the state level, it will not be. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's a worst case scenario that, or maybe an example that you've seen? What's kind of the, oh no, everything is on fire, we need to fix this scenario that you've had or that you can imagine if you can't necessarily say what happened?
Right. Okay. So this hasn't happened to any of our clients. Worst case scenario across the board is if there is, and I have seen this, but not directly, thankfully, for many reasons. But if a company, so on a prevailing wage project, the lender as well as the general contractor take responsibility for the labor reporting. And it's primarily the general contractor because they have direct contact with their subcontractors, and then it goes down from there, first to second to third. Anyway, so worst case scenario that I have actually followed over the years to see the resolution a couple years ago was a company that was deliberately trying not to pay prevailing wage reporting accurately. They were perjuring themselves all over the place. The workers were vastly underpaid. There was so many problems. There were fines and penalties and sanctions. They were debarred for many years, all these different things. And the bottom line was ultimately the workers were paid what they were supposed to be paid. After a lot of other money was also spent. And then the long-term effect on that was that company, that general contractor, as well as some of the subcontractors, not all of them, but some of them, but especially the general contractor and the developer, they were no longer allowed to work on publicly funded construction projects. And that's local, state, and federal a lot of times because the money, like the IIJA grants, they start at the federal level, but then they trickle down to specific like housing agencies or infrastructure, renewable energy, just wherever the money flows down to. So it looks like a state project or a local project. It, it looks not like it's federally funded, but it is. So they can't work on any of these projects. So they can only consistently work on what is essentially privately funded construction projects. And because there's so much public funds out there and companies are not able to only work in that space long term, it makes it hard for that company to be profitable. It's not impossible, but it's definitely harder. And there are several companies out there that stay in the private space, but if they have a bad rep that they're dragging with them and they're no longer allowed to work in the public space. So that's my worst case scenario.
Yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. So it's time for our episode's Would You Rather.
Okay.
So would you rather have the ability to pause time for exactly 10 minutes per day, or would you rather have the ability to rewind time by 10 seconds only once a day?
That's a hard one. I don't know. I would probably say 10 seconds. There's been a few times where I'm thinking of one time specifically where I stubbed my toe and man, did that hurt. And I was quite loud because I went, ah! And it was in the middle of a time where everybody was supposed to be silent. It was the worst timing. So I think the 10 seconds. Yeah, because if I pause time for 10 minutes in the day, I'm sure I wouldn't be using it for something productive. I would probably be taking a nap.
Yeah, 10-minute power nap right there.
Yes. Yeah, so I would say rewind 10 seconds so that way I can like not interrupt that once in a lifetime family event that I really needed to be silent at. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the 10 seconds is the way to go there.
Yeah.
So to wrap us out, we want to help the listeners avoid these costly delays, headaches. As a final piece of advice, what is the number one thing a contractor must set up before starting a Colorado infrastructure project?
Trade classifications. Figure that out. It's only going to get easier.
Perfect. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. If you like the podcast, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, whether you're on YouTube or on your preferred podcasting platform. And if you're active in the space and want to surround yourself with others who get it, head over to our website and apply for our membership portal. It's an exclusive community for professionals navigating the exact same space. Thank you, everybody, for joining me.